and everything was telling me not to quit, and yet something inside me was saying quit. So it was my intuition, it was my gut that was pushing me, and it's obviously the best decision I ever made for many reasons.
Welcome to your Next Six Figures podcast, here to smash through that barrier and give you the business your hard work deserves. Here's your host, coach, consultant and author, Marc Ford.
On today's podcast, I talk to the amazing Anna Lundberg. Anna is the founder of One Step Outside, where she helps experienced professionals around the world design the career, the business and the lifestyle that brings them more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment outside of the conventional 9 to 5. She is the host of the Reimagining Success podcast and author of Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5. So we talk about the lessons that you can take into your business and get your next six figures into your business. Hello, Anna. How are you? Thank you so much for doing this. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, so as I touched on in the intro, you've written a brilliant book called Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5. Tell us a little bit about what drove you to write this book in the first place.
Well, to be honest, it was quite selfish. I should say, first of all, it was published in 2018, I believe, so it's a few years ago already. I've always wanted to be a writer, as many of us maybe dream of when we're younger. And so there was a bit of a personal ambition just to write something. So that was already there. And then secondly, selfishly also, I was on my own transition out of the corporate 9 to 5, as I call it. And in that process, I began to speak to people for my own personal inspiration. So I used it as an excuse to get ideas from other people, to be reassured and to be inspired. And so that's how it began. It began as a blog series. And then ultimately I thought, hey, I can collect these stories together into a book. So I sort of could achieve both that personal goal of writing something and having this thing in my hand, and then also hopefully helping other people in the way that all these people had helped me as well. So partly altruistic. But certainly for me, it was came from a selfish drive to learn more for myself and to reassure myself as I was going through the difficult journey out of my full-time employment.
So what were you doing before you joined us self-employed bozos, as I like to call this, really?
So I had followed very much the non-self-employed bozo path, which was very expected, kind of not very intentional, because I'd studied one thing, ended up in a totally different thing. As I say, I ended up in marketing at Procter & Gamble, so big FMCG company in Geneva in Switzerland, actually, working on perfume, so luxury perfume, skincare and makeup. I'd studied international relations and politics, so I felt a little bit disconnected from that, but nonetheless, an amazing company, learned a lot, met lots of great people, learned really the foundations of big business, I guess, but branding. You got a lot of responsibility in those marketing roles from day one, even though I had no idea what I was doing. So it was a lot of learning on the job. And I was there for 7 years. I did a design marketing conceptual role, then I was in more of a commercial media operations role, and then I became a specialist in digital marketing, which at the time was still very new, if you can imagine. And so that was amazing, because I became kind of an entrepreneur, an internal consultant, which then made it very easy for me to step out. So initially I was doing digital marketing consulting for other companies when I came out of there as well. So that was quite an easy, kind of landed on my feet thanks to in-demand skills and network and that kind of thing. And already that was 2013, so it feels a bit crazy. I've been longer out than in, as I say now. So, you know, it's quite a distant memory, but still I cling on to that kind of ex-P&G, ex-corporate label, I suppose.
So I just want to clarify the fact that I used the word bozo, by the way. It was just a word that popped in my head. I just think that we are all slightly mental when we do become self-employed, on the basis that logically it makes no sense to do it, and actually it's a huge risk. And really, our nearest and dearest are probably the first ones to tell us that we shouldn't do it.
So funny you should say that, only because I was the most rational, good girl, following the sort of logic always, and I think that's the very corporate way. It's the very Northern European education system, and everything was telling me not to quit, and yet something inside me was saying quit. So it was my intuition, it was my gut that was pushing me, and it's obviously the best decision I ever made for many reasons. So it was definitely not very logical, not very sensible, and of course it's been challenging, but I can't imagine, knock on wood, wanting to go back to where I was. And I wouldn't be going back anyway, I'd be going forwards, of course, if I made that decision. But for me at least, it's been the best decision ever made.
What do you think? Okay, so let's just go down that road, explore that for a second. What do you think your life would have been like had you stayed? So it's that's quite a powerful thing to be able to walk away from such a big role, big job, big company, on a gut feeling, something telling you inside that you need to go. Now you can look back on it, we're nearly 10 years removed from it, I suppose. What would you have imagined your life like if you'd still been there, if you'd still been in the big corporate giants?
We've hit a nerve there, because I've been thinking about that recently, and it's hard not to look at my colleagues who are like senior directors, managers, earning, I'm sure, a lot of money very comfortably in their jobs. And also because of, I guess, the changes of the last few years, maybe there's an increase in things like workplace well-being and hybrid working and so on. So there is more flexibility, and there are incredible opportunities to make change from inside the company. So I'm coming at this from helping people leave the corporate 9-to-5, but of course there could be amazing opportunities to make that world better from the inside, right? So I was thinking about that recently, thinking, what if I were now like, VP of marketing and and so on. So it's easy to think of those kind of external pieces of validation, and I'd have an incredible job and salary and benefits and so on. However, I don't think I would have, I know I wouldn't have had any of the experience I had. So I've gone through so many things. The initial marketing consulting jobs I did, I traveled in between. I was off in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Sydney, whatever. I have paddleboarded down the Mississippi. I, went hot air ballooning and whatever. I'm dismissing it. And already this would be amazing if I did it now, because my life is very different now. But I've had all these incredible adventures, and even these conversations I'm having now, I just don't think I would have had those. I didn't even know podcasting existed. I certainly wouldn't have imagined myself having a podcast. Now I encourage people in corporate jobs to develop their personal brand and build that platform. But would I have done it? I don't know. So I know there is that kind of sliding doors moment that I could have very easily gone back. And in fact, I took a sabbatical to travel across South America. And halfway through, I called up HR and I quit, because I knew if I came back to Geneva into my comfort zone, they were putting me back into, funnily enough, pet care. So I would have been going back into like a traditional brand role, and I would have been very comfortable. I just saw my friends from Geneva last weekend. We went for a girls' weekend in Barcelona, and they're living their best lives. It is, the lake there, the mountains, the skiing, the quality of life, the salary. It's pretty cushy. So that is, of course, an attractive world. However, again, the bigger experiences I've had since leaving have just been so incredible. Not to mention, I also fell in love, had children, blah, blah, blah. And that wouldn't have happened with these particular specimens if I had stayed in Geneva. So, it's impossible to regress it. But of course, you always wonder what if, and how could that look different? And would I have more traditional markers of success if I'd continued on that path?
Do you find it slightly frustrating, obviously, coming out of big corporate life, and then we are where we are right now? And obviously, we've all been through the last 2.5 years, worldwide. Is it slightly frustrating that actually it took something like the last 2.5 years for big corporate companies to really knuckle down and start looking after people's well-being and be a little bit more flexible on their working and how they worked and where they worked and when they worked?
Yeah, so frustrating. And yet it's also really positive, I suppose, that something constructive has come out of something that wasn't particularly great, right? So it's amazing that some companies at least are waking up to it, that we've realized that people can work from home and there are such things as virtual tools that you can use and so on, right? And yes, people's well-being is important, and family life, etc. So yeah, it's pretty depressing that it took COVID to wake people up, I suppose, but at the same time, and also to wake us up as individuals, right? Because a lot of people, there's all this talk of the great resignation and so on. Suddenly people have gone, oh, actually, it's not that nice to commute to a job that you don't really like. And they've realized that, hey, being present with my family, there's a lot of value in that. Albeit, of course, we had lots of stresses and, the homeschooling and of course, the threat of illness the whole time and of killing your parents and so on, which hasn't been a particularly fun aspect of it. But it's been amazing that people have kind of had the time to take a step back and see what does really matter. So yes, frustrating, but also positive. I guess we have to take the positives that come out of the dark times that we've been through.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you were writing this book, obviously you were getting other people to give you their stories, give you their ideas and their opinions. What was the worst what was the worst experience you had leaving corporate and then becoming self-employed? What was the worst thing that, as you look back on it, that you're almost glad that there was a lesson in there, but it's something you'd rather tell people about now?
Oh, I'm trying to think if there was a terrible. I look at things with very rose-tinted glasses, you know.
I mean, you're incredibly positive. I've already worked that out.
Positive. I know what.
There's a chink in your armour somewhere there, Anna. Sorry about that.
There's got to be something. Don't worry. There's a lot of things I've done wrong, and you know, I know I saw on LinkedIn that you said, you know, we shouldn't be celebrating failures, and I certainly don't. But I think they have definitely been. You know, there was a lot of naivety that I had, as many people do, and we chatted about that before we went online. In terms of, I've quit my job. Ta-da! I'm going to live my best life, and it's all going to be wonderful. And the first couple of years, I was earning more than I was in my job, and the consulting was very lucrative, and then I was traveling and spending all my money. It was wonderful, and then I went through a little bit more of a hippie phase where I was trying to do more fulfilling work and perhaps not earning as much. So there's definitely been kind of navigating that pendulum of earning a load of money but not doing work I want to do, and then doing work I want to do but not earning money, and that's been the hard balance. What's best then?
What's best? So what's best? Obviously earning the money, being paid what you're worth, and working for people and just spending money, or doing something more fulfilling. I dare say there's no wrong answer to this. It's just that, you know, there are those phrases that say, you know, find something you love and you'll never work another day in your life. Well, really, you know, I love going to the pub, but unfortunately that just means that I'll have a really bad liver. So, and I'd be a rubbish pub landlord. So, which was more fulfilling? What were you happier doing in an odd way?
Do you know, I love the question, and unfortunately I'm going to be cheeky and say, of course, there is no right answer, because my whole concept is that you need to define success for you. And I even think for me, or I know for me, my definition of success changed, because when I was single and escaping the corporate world, then for me it was incredible to work with other clients, to set my own rates, to, you know, set the boundaries, and then to travel in between. That was just the most amazing thing. So yeah, the work wasn't like the most fun, and I realized after a few contracts, hang on, I'm just doing the same thing again and again. You come into a company, they've got the same issues, you solve them, you go, you know, that wasn't for me so rewarding after a few projects. But at the time it was amazing compared to working Monday to Friday in a job. And then when I went into that hippie phase, when I was, I can blog and I'm going to be really world famous, and you know, and I was paddleboarding and kayaking and traveling, then that was of course amazing, because I was being all adventurous and exciting and daring. And then I came back to more of a 9-to-5, because the guy I met unfortunately had a 9-to-5 in London. So then I came back to more of that structure, and then I took the business a bit more seriously, to be honest. And yes, I'm a very positive person. I'm feeling when I'm saying it, I really enjoyed every step of the way. There are pros and cons with each of them, right? And that is what's hard, because there's no answer. Of course, there's not better. And in fact, I see people who are happy having the job, which is just, you know, it pays the bills. Yeah, it's hard, but it gives me the security for the family. And I come home and then I go to the pub and I run ultra marathons or whatever, right? You do the work and then you live your life outside of that. That works for some people. For me, I'd rather have more of the balance. I'd say, I guess that's my simple answer, that of course I want to do fulfillment, and I believe it's possible to do fulfilling work. And I even think you're going to earn more money if you do. Now, we're not talking about, yes, I like cake and therefore I need to work in a cake factory, because that's a dangerous slope, right? But there's this magical place that combines work that you're good at and that you enjoy and that feels like it's making a difference, but also is going to make you money, because it's not a hobby, it's not a charity. At the end of the day, it's a business, and it needs to be treated like a business. And that was a big shift for me too. I think I was very casual about it, just kind of expecting, hey, I'm a coach now, everybody come and work with me. And a couple of clients did amazingly, but obviously that's probably not the best way to run a business. Just because I decide one day to become a coach doesn't mean that people will suddenly see me in that light. So it took a long time for me to steer the ship also away from that kind of luxury, big brand, big business legacy or brand, to more of what I want to do with smaller businesses and individuals, and more the coaching side and positive psychology. That's taken me time to build my brand in that new area, and to then earn money doing it.
Did you see, I mean, did you see an awful lot, certainly during the pandemic, did you see an awful lot more people suddenly appear as coaches and actually think that, do you know what, this seems like a really easy gig, doesn't it? And obviously you just alluded to, there was a little bit more to it than, you know, everybody see me as this and now I'm this. Actually, there's
there is a journey. Makes you sound like a contestant on the X Factor. Yeah, the J word. But there's obviously a distance to go between the two. Did you see an awful lot more people sort of suddenly appear during COVID that sort of like said, yay, now I'm a coach. I've left my business. Now I'm a coach. Come and work with me.
I think the thing is that we're so deep into it, and I'm sure you are too, on Facebook, all you see is coaches. And I feel like that's all there is in the whole world. I just live in this sea of coaches. So that's been the case since I started. I think my experience for my own coach certification, because I did do the formal training, but initially, again, selfishly, I wasn't even deciding on, I didn't think I would build a business on it. I did it for my own kind of personal development. I found it interesting and I thought I'd just learn, and then I loved it, as many people do, and I go, no, I'm coach, so I fell for it like others do. Unfortunately, the trainings don't give you any guidance on how to build your audience, how to build the business, how to price it. They all teach you, which is, well, at least the good ones, I guess, teach you the ethics and the process, and we did a lot of peer-to-peer coaching. We got a lot of experience and it was amazing. I'm so glad I did it. But all of us came out naively going, I'm going to help the world, and then of course it turned out not to be so easy. So I think, I don't know if more people have, but I think what happens is, as I did, unfortunately, so I hold my hand up here, you have an amazing coaching experience with somebody and you go through that personal transformation, and then you go, I want to help other people because I've, was sort of evangelistic about it because it was so incredible for us. And the irony is I didn't even know barely what coaching was when I was in that situation, and I certainly wasn't looking for a coach. So it makes it quite interesting now being on the other side. How do I reach the people who are many, who wouldn't even consider coaching, who think that's just airy fairy fluff, like when would I ever spend money on a coach kind of thing. So definitely we come out naively thinking we want to help people and so on, and we don't realise that we have to treat it like a business, and it's not just about helping people. And I do see, it's true that I do see on LinkedIn, Facebook, people posting the kind of posts that I was probably posting when I started too, that are never going to get them clients, and you want to go, please come and pay me and I can help you. But there's maybe that journey we have to go through, try it ourselves, realize it's not working, and then that's when we kind of go, oh, actually, can someone help me please, because it's not quite as easy as I thought.
See, I love conversations like this because it goes to show that there are so many different kinds of coaches out there that have all got different backdrops, different experiences. My experience of becoming a coach and consultant was quite simply is that I worked with a bunch of idiots, and in my own humble experience, I made them an awful lot of money by doing common sense things, and I got very frustrated by the fact that they played an awful lot of political games to get where they were, but they were never really there on merit. They always sort of like benefited from other people that made them look better than they really were. And I think when I first came across coaching was when I left and then started running my own business. But I've been running my own business for 3 years at that point. And it was a chap that I came across. I'll give him a name check. His name's David Holland. And it was just the way in which he presented really simple ideas, really great thoughts and great processes. And I actually realized that whilst I was running my business in a particular industry, there was a reason why I was making the money I was making, and I was earning more per hour than probably 95% of the industry. And it was that moment when I saw this guy present stuff and become a friend of mine, I then turned around and go, do you know what? I really want to help these guys because these guys do great jobs, do great work. They're fantastic individuals, but nobody ever taught them how to run a business. I can be that guy. I can be that guy that helps them run a business, which kind of in a very roundabout way, which is typical of me, kind of leads me on to my next question about your book. What were the 3 things that you learned from other people's stories about them changing and moving into self-employed work? What were the 3 big themes or big ideas or life-changing events that really sort of like, popped their ugly heads at you?
So the things I asked everybody the same 5 questions, and of course, and actually when I first did it, it was just in writing, so I literally just got those short answers to those questions. As I went on, I then started doing them by video, and now it's actually on my podcast. But initially, it was quite short answers to those questions. But I was a bit struck by, even though everyone came from very different walks of life, and it started with me, of course, just random people that I was traveling and meeting and friends and so on. So it was maybe a bit sort of sporadic in terms of who I was meeting, but then it expanded and I went to digital nomad conferences and met people and so on. But I was struck by the similarities that, of course, given very different circumstances, everybody was saying pretty much the same thing, which is good. It's reassuring, but also in a way surprising, I guess, because you expect it to be so different. But I think, the questions I asked were included, how did you arrive at that point? What were the struggles? How did you find the support? And what's the best thing about your life now? And then what advice would you give? And I guess in terms of a handful of common themes, one was the thing that held them back, which of course was the things that we fear of failure, fear of success to some extent, fear of making a mistake, of course, letting go of the stable salary, uncertainty of what's on the other side. Am I good enough? It's all those mindset things that we work on as coaches. So that was just reassuring for me, again, because I came at this from quite a selfish perspective, but to understand that everyone feels these things, even though maybe they're presenting a very confident persona on social media, behind it, everybody had the same doubts. The thing about the best part of their lifestyle, almost everybody said freedom. Freedom is that word that always comes up. It was a value that came up for me. I just had another conversation with someone earlier today where we were talking about redefining even freedom, because of course it can mean so many different things, but that seems to be this big pull. If you've been through the education system and the corporate, the kind of rat race, there's so much structure, process and so on, that freedom becomes the big pull that everybody longs for and loves. And then in terms of the third one, I guess in terms of the advice everyone gives, pretty much everybody said, just do it. I don't know if that's helpful advice, because you're just like, oh, but there's so many reasons. And of course, some said have a plan B and take a step and get help and blah, blah, blah. But in essence, the very clear message was do it. There's no way you're going to regret it. So in a way, that, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but in a way, this was the goal for me, was to show people that it is possible and even desirable, I guess, is totally feasible, and encouraging people in a way to go for it if they wanted to. I never want to push people to quit their job, but if that's something that they want to do, then I was trying to show them it's totally possible. Yes, there are fears and concerns, but you can overcome them. So it was hopefully a very positive, inspiring message in this particular book. That was the goal of that, while also being realistic about challenges and things.
It's interesting. You mentioned sort of like a couple of times there, the word help. Was there a theme that was running through help? Obviously, this is a podcast for, to help people sort of like get their next six figures in business. What kind of help, did people really feel that they benefited from, or were there a group of people they felt they benefited from, or was it that within their own industry or outside the industry?
It's a great question. I think there's different types of support as well, because there's sort of potentially financial support. So a couple at least have been lucky to have a partner maybe who had a more stable job, and that then gives you the sense that you can be a bit more experimental with your job, right? Or maybe you had savings. I certainly had a lot of savings from having had a generous salary, and that kind of thing is financial support is important. But then there's the emotional support. We tend to, unfortunately, our immediate circle tend to project their fears and concerns and insecurities on us, right? So actually our friends and family are going to be on the side of, oh no, you crazy fool, what are you doing? You can't quit your job. So then you need to look for other communities like masterminds, incubators, whatever, online, offline, even listening to podcasts. For me, even writing the book, it seemed like such a crazy dream. But then when I started listening to podcasts and going to writing workshops, I was surrounded by people who were doing it. And so it wasn't a question of can I do it? It's a question of how am I going to do it? And that shift is quite important, I think. So having people out there doing it, cheering you on. And then obviously there's also the expertise from a mentor or a course and so on. So there was that spectrum. There's the community, you need people who get it, like-minded people, your tribe. There's potentially financial support, emotional support, getting through the hardships. And then also the actual mentorship and expertise and guidance, either within a particular industry or type of business, or the broader kind of business coaching piece. But definitely those are sort of three of the themes that came across.
So obviously, if you wrote the book now, and obviously before we started recording, obviously we had a little conversation where you feel that it's now time for another book. But if you were to write this one again, what differences do you think you'd find, especially after the last 2.5 years?
Well, the thing is, in a way, I feel like it hasn't changed so much. I think if anything, there'd be more of it, right? Because I feel like with this whole Great Resignation, it's just more of the same. There'd be maybe more stories, and obviously there would be a theme of well, I was made redundant or put on furlough, and therefore I was forced into, and in fact, that was one of the scenarios, of course, the trigger that led to somebody leaving. For me, it was like a slow burn. It was just kind of a wearing down over time. There was no sudden crisis. For some people, it's burnout. For some people, it's a, tragedy or illness in the family. And in this case, obviously, it was then the pandemic that drove people out. So I think the impulse, the trigger would be different. But I don't think the other thing, the fear of failure and success, the mindset piece is still there. I think the need for help is still there. I think everything else is there. Now, obviously, a lot of my stories were people then going off traveling, and that, I guess, wouldn't have been possible the last couple of years. So there would have been less travel, unfortunately. But what I would do, and again, that is the next book. It's not just that I feel like there's another book. For me, this was a moment in time for me that was at the beginning of my journey. And to be transparent, several of the people in this book have gone back to a corporate job. And most of them have done it for a good reason, I guess I say. And some have done it because the business hasn't worked out. And so the next book is going to be outside the 9 to 5. Hang on a second. It's not just about, I quit. It's all going to be wonderful. It's actually making it work sustainably over time, right? So that's the next piece, which I think is missing from this book, because this book was sort of an inspirational, hey, it's really cool, freedom, flexibility, come and join me on the other side. And now it's like, ooh, we're on the other side. Now let's get stuck in. There's quite a bit of hard work. These are the things you need to make it work. So that's where, I've been focusing, obviously, given my business is now more mature as well. And also I'm seeing that that's the help that's needed, because it isn't just about that moment of handing in your resignation. Unfortunately, there are many, many other things that need to happen afterwards.
I'm starting to think there's almost a trilogy in this as well, and the fact that almost
the third one getting to your like 10 million mark.
Yeah, well, no. I think the third book is the back to 9 to 5.
Because
obviously when you
get to that point,
because when you wrote it originally, 9 to 5 was it's a version of what 9 to 5 isn't right now. People are still working 9 till 5, but it's a different version of 9 to 5. And really, if you sort of like, no pressure, mate, but if you did it before 2028, you could actually, it's almost like they're almost bookending each other in 10 years. And that would be. 2028
sounds feasible. I'll do it. Done.
That's almost like a really good social study as well. I mean, you could probably get a doctorate out of that. That'd be quite interesting.
I love that, but also because the 9 to 5, I've always been a bit reluctant to use the term, because of course people go, I know, I don't work 9 to 5. I work 7 till 7, whatever it is, right? And also the corporate 9 to 5 means certain things to me, and it's true that now those foundations have been questioned, right? Because I saw it as corporate meaning big company, tied to an office, working certain hours, you've got an employer, etc. And some of that is kind of potentially being questioned now. So yeah, it is interesting to think, what does outside the 9 to 5 mean? Can you live outside the 9 to 5 and inside the 9 to 5? I don't know. So yeah, I'll put a little reference to you in the footer.
Thanks, mate.
Right.
Cheers.
There you go. Come out
no, it's all right. No, that's one of the things off my bucket list. I'm in somebody's footer. That's great. Thank you very much. You got the Andes or Ben Nevis. I'll be in somebody's footer. It's fine.
There you
go. One last question before we go, mate. Obviously, this is a podcast for people wanting to get their next 6 figures. What you've been coaching for many years now, and obviously as we've already talked about, you've seen corporate life, you've seen people starting up and going back to corporate life, or people making a real good show of these sorts of things. What 2 things would you just ask people to consider? Not even sort of like live your life by this, but consider when they're working towards their next 6 figures in their business. What are the 2 things that you think that, do you know what, if you just keep this in the back of your mind, it's going to set you on the right path?
So I might answer it a bit differently to what you'd expect, maybe because it's not so much about a strategy or a tactic, but the first question I would ask is, why do you want your next 6 figures? Like, for me, that is the big question. What is success for you? Because sometimes we want just a random number because it sounds good. Sometimes we have actually, a particular lifestyle vision that we want to lead, and that's, very clearly linked to that. Sometimes we want to make a bigger impact in the world, and that means making more money. We want a bigger team, they're very different motivations. And so if you're just hustling and going to that next level just for the sake of it, I'd encourage you to take a step back and just ask yourself why, and is it actually important to you? Because obviously, as we also talked, there are new challenges that come with growing a bigger business. Some of us don't want to have that. I had a coach who had a small sort of, pretty much was just her and one other girl, and then within a few years, boom, she's got a team of 40 people, massive 8-9 figure, whatever. And for me, that's not actually what I want. I may change my mind, but right now I've got 2 little kids. I work 3 days a week. That's not quite the setup I'm looking at. So for some of us, there might even be a ceiling, at least in the short term, for how much we want to earn. So what is success for you in terms of income, but also what does that business look like? Some people want to just be CEO, sell the business, go off and do another business. For me, again, little good girl me or whatever, I want to actually do the work. I love the work I do. I do find it fulfilling and rewarding. So I don't want to just sit back and outsource my work to other coaches. I want to actually be in the business. So probably that means there's a ceiling as well, and it defines a business model in a certain way. So number one is what is success for you, and then secondly is looking at how you're going to get there and making sure that the strategies that you're using are going to get you to your vision of success. Because again, we said that there are so many coaches who are saying, oh, you've got to do workshops, you shouldn't do workshops, group programs, not group program. I mean, in my world, it's a lot of this kind of thing in online entrepreneurship, more so than in the retail kind of businesses and so on. But I'm sure there are similar kind of formulaic responses. And it's very easy. I had a client who did an expensive course on how to do webinars, and it wasn't the right thing for her. She had many other things with the business that we could have focused on. She immediately regretted it because it wasn't the right thing for her. And yet she'd sort of fallen for this thing like, oh, you've got to do these perfect like sales webinars or whatever. So it's just making sure you're working with the right mentors who, as you said, will call you out for the things that aren't working, help you focus on the things that are, but most importantly, get you to what you want to be doing. Because if you, simple things, but like if you hate being on video, or if you hate people, somebody said the other day they hate people, okay, probably you don't want to build a business that involves you to like have to be with
brilliant.
So maybe you shouldn't be involved at all. You should, I don't know what you can do, like just lie there on the couch like your little friend there. But it is important to consider, otherwise you're going to build a successful business that isn't meaningful to you, that isn't enjoyable, that's just another kind of cage for you, right? In a way, from my corporate experience, you're recreating an even worse, you're becoming a worse boss for yourself than any of the other guys ever were, right? So those are the two things. One is, what is success for you? Why are you actually working towards this goal? What is the vision? And then secondly, what are the right strategies that will get you there? Not just jumping on, everyone's got to be on TikTok, or you've got to do reels, or workshops, not workshops, group, you've got to choose the things that are right for you. And there is no right answer. So that's quite scary and difficult, but it also is empowering because it means you get to choose and create your own adventure.
Now, that is one of my annoyances, where everybody sort of like says everybody has to be on TikTok. No, they don't. No, really, they don't. They don't have. Not everybody has to be on TikTok, especially me. That is a fact. Anna, as we finish this, where can people find you? Where can they buy your book? It's a wonderful book. It really is good, mate. And there's some great little nuggets in there for people to take away and just make themselves feel better about themselves. They've taken a great big step to go and be self-employed, but sometimes it just needs a random voice for other people to just remind themselves that they're doing what they're doing for the right reasons. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so the best place is the Reimagining Success podcast, which I also launched in 2018. So it was a good year for me. So Reimagining Success with Anna Lundberg. And it is around escaping the 9 to 5, but I talk about the 5 pillars that I talk about of building a life outside the 9 to 5. And yeah, absolutely. The book, Amazon, it's in Kindle, hardback, paperback. And look out for the new one, because if you're a little bit further along in your business, then you'll be interested in the outside the 9 to 5 version, coming soon to a theatre near you, hopefully. And then the trilogy, and when was it? 2028, the third one?
Yeah, by 2028. Yeah, by 2028, the trilogy's going to be there.
I don't know. I thought that this time, and this one took much longer to come to market as well. So let's see. But yeah, Reimagining Success podcast, best place.
Seriously, the amount of books that you'll be churning out is going to be very much like the Harry Potter of business. There you go. You'll be just churning them out.
That is my dream. So yeah, definitely. I like it. J.K. Rowling, if only.
If only. like we all say. You're absolutely right, my friend. Anna, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your precious time. Really has been brilliant. And I know lots of listeners are going to get so much out of this. Anna, thank you very much.
Thank you, Marc.
And that's it for this podcast. To find out more about Anna, her own podcast and her book, just drop into the show notes and all the links are going to be there. If you want the first 3 steps to your next 6 figures, just click on the link in the show notes and download my free guide to taking that next big step. It's free, it's packed with value, and it'll help you get the business that your hard work really deserves. And for loads more ideas, thoughts and strategies, you can just sort of drop into my website, which is www.marcford.uk, and basically fill your boots. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, be brilliant, sell stuff, and go and get those next 6 figures.